watched a movie. We all watched Red Dawn. I don't know, Djene, did
I
you watch?
also read the thing.
Oh yeah, right. We're gonna okay. So
Okay, I just
starting with this episode of Culture Deconstructed, we're actually going to try to figure out if we align with any approach that's out there to criticism, rather than simply just giving our opinions like we're Siskel and Ebert. We're gonna see if we can interpret these films, the pop culture. I sent out a link to an essay written. When was it published? 19. Oh, where's the 19? Oh, there it is. 1946, called "The Intentional Fallacy" by a guy named W.K. Wimsatt Jr. and another one named M.C. Beardsley, and it's all about poetry. This essay and how to interpret poetry correctly, but I think it kind of roughly translates over to a formalist approach
I mean, one of
to
the problems with
film
it for
criticism.
me was that it seemed to be criticizing something which is like no longer hegemonic 'cause it was that old. They seemed to be
Right.
criticizing something that was obviously a problem at the time, but I feel like we probably have generally moved past it by now. But obviously, I mean, I agreed with it basically.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the thing about reading, an essay that's arguing strenuously against something in order to provide its own perspective, is that generally the arguments marshaled are fairly good and it's easy to agree with, but you have to look at what the formalist alternative would be, see if there are problems there. But the idea here is that rather than asking ourselves, what did the filmmakers intend? We're going to be asking, what did this film do as a film in the context of, I guess, Hollywood filmmaking, as a giving us a formal structure to judge it by, if we can. But we probably will quickly devolve into just our own opinions because we're just starting out on this path of becoming critics, becoming cultural critics. But yeah, the movie we're going to be discussing is Red Dawn, not the Red Dawn from 2012, but
The good Red Dawn,
the original from 1984.
But it's a heroic movie where the Russians attempt to liberate the American workers from the oppression of the capitalist system, and the Christian Mujahideen recruits child soldiers in order to
And commit a lot of war crimes.
commit war crimes against liberating forces. No.
Doug,
No,
Doug,
no.
If the Soviet army comes to town, the correct thing to do is to give them directions.
Well, when I started watching this film last night with Noah, we both started out going, well, we're going to be on the side of the commies, obviously. But as it moved along, Patrick Swayze's, charm and Lee Thompson's beauty, and Jennifer Grey's spunk.
I mean, I think what I found most kind of the best thing about this movie was that it wasn't just like a series of W's for the insurgents. It showed really how grim things do get, and kind of the things that you end up doing in this sort of thing. They summarily execute their friend. They blow themselves up with grenades and all various kinds of things. I think that was, for me, the best part of the film, that it wasn't just kind of like, I mean, most of the action scenes were completely ridiculous. With this, like, they were killing like 100 soldiers, and the Soviets were just like not firing back.
No, they were firing back, but they were bouncing off those metal shields that they were hiding behind, or the rocks that they were hiding behind, and the Soviets weren't prepared for grenades. They didn't understand.
Child soldiers.
Obviously. It was not the most realistic movie all in all, but it was, I think, a fun film, and it was a teenage action movie. That's how we should judge it. I think is in the genre of like high school.
Well, is that because of the intentions of how it was made, Doug?
No, that's just because that's what it was formally. I'm going to see if I can do this, the formal critique. One of the things about this, what I will say, and this is maybe cheating, is if you compare it to the 2012 Red Dawn, it is just eminently more watchable. It's just you can follow the plot. You can distinguish one character from another.
I actually had a lot of trouble distinguishing the characters.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, some of them don't matter, okay? But, I mean, you can distinguish the characters who do matter one from another.
I mean, of the insurgents, I couldn't really make out between the guys. There was just Patrick Swayze and then, like, the psychotic guy, and then there was, like, the 5 other guys, one of which is his brother.
Well, look, there was Charlie Sheen, okay, and Patrick Swayze. Charlie Sheen played his brother. And then there was the other guy who played the kind of the inhuman one, the one who ended up getting killed by the helicopter later in the movie. He was a name actor too. I forget his name, but he's been in some things. And then there was a couple more. I think there was like 2 or 3 more.
But the 2012 remake, I guess, or reboot, I don't know what you would call it. It like had no soul. It had no relevance. It was made because that other movie was made, right?
I mean, if Red Dawn had been made now and was good, because it's a good movie regardless of anything else, there would be loads of fucking sequels, and there wasn't, which I found is interesting. It just shows like a different era of cinema, right? Because it was quite like an open, like it's not like the Americans won at the end and drove the Soviets out. It just kind of, it was all focused on this fight in one town, which the Americans in the end lose. These insurgents anyway. So you could make a billion sequels to this, but they didn't.
Red Dawn made $38 million.
On a budget of what?
Let's see.
It couldn't have been that much of a budget. I mean, they blow up a school bus.
Man, the start of the film is the most ridiculous bit. I like that, you know, they just used like RPGs to fire into like a school corridor for no reason. And then like a couple of minutes later, the soldiers were complaining they didn't have enough anti-tank missiles.
Well, you know, they were having. I mean,
it was made for. The budget was 17 million, I guess, or
Okay.
4.5 million.
There you go. They made money on it. But think of the structure of the movie, right? So we open up the movie, and the Soviets sucker punch America and paratroop into this small town in the Midwest.
They kill the high school teacher, first casualty.
And not only do they attack this small town, which inexplicably has a black principal. I think he was
a history teacher, wasn't he?
He was a history teacher. And then they start doing war crimes, just straight up, instantly do war crimes. They launch an offensive against a school, like they're doing like commando roles on the. So straight off the bat, we have this utterly ridiculous presentation of the invasion and the presentation of the Soviets as making no attempt to pretend that this is some kind of liberation. They're just here to kick ass and take names. And then obviously things go a little bit south for the Americans, and all the kids escape, and you know the guerrilla war happens. And then you've got this whole arc where these kids start off as, you know, dumb high school kids who care about nothing, and you know end up becoming.
They care about the football game. They care about the things.
They care about kid stuff, but they become adults in the process of fighting this guerrilla warfare across the mountains of the United States. And the interesting characters are, of course, that the Soviets are like just animals, just, you know, stupid and also violent. The South Americans, the Nicaraguans and Cubans, have a little bit more understanding because they're partisans, so they know what's going on. So there's a little bit of sympathy there, but it is. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous in its presentation of what an invading army is like, because the invading army is both more brutal in a more deliberate sense, but at the same time more ordered and restrained, if that makes sense.
And they seem to be occupying like one town in Colorado with like a battalion-sized group for no real clear purpose. But one thing I wanted to say that was interesting.
I just want to point out that I have a personal connection to this film. One of my friends in high school was an extra in the scene.
Oh, you said
I couldn't spot him, but he was an extra in the scene in the high school. So he's one of the kids in the classroom that gets shot up. And I imagine that he was the one kid that was killed hanging out of the window in that scene.
Yeah.
So you say this is unrealistic and that the Soviets were depicted as being too brutal, but all I know is I lost a friend, theoretically, in a pretend world, to this invasion.
What I wanted to say about the structure was it's like kind of this only an external view of the occupation. Like, I think, especially if you made this film now, you'd have like a character that was inside the prison camp, a character that was kind of like inside the Soviet-American Friendship Culture Center, or whatever the fuck it was called. But in this film, apart from one trip they take into town and the other time when the girl drops off the explosives in another terrorist attack on the town, we don't get like any internal picture of the Soviet occupation. And also, they didn't feel the need to kind of explain to us like the exact, they weren't constantly like flashing up maps and stuff. They just kind of expected us to be like, this is an insurgency, there's fighting. They don't know what's going on, and neither do you, but they're just fighting, you know?
Look, I think it's a mistake, really. Seriously, I think it's a mistake to view this picture and ask the question, is this an accurate depiction of what a Soviet invasion would be like? Or, what does it say about how Americans view politics? Although there is something to be gleaned from that, maybe. But before I came on this stream, I talked to very briefly to Spencer Leonard, who's the co-editor at the Sublation magazine coming out in May. And he said this is one of his favorite films. He loves it. And he thinks of the invading Soviets as being pretty much the same as like the shark in Jaws.
Yeah.
Like,
that's 100%. That's 100. I think that's two things. I think the reason I highlighted the fact that the invasion is portrayed in like a totally ridiculous way is because it's not like really an invasion. It's like an utter fantasy. It's a kid's understanding of what an invasion would look like. It's just a terrifying bad guy. And plus you have kind of piled onto that anti-communism and sort of we don't need to know that the Soviets are the bad guys. They don't need to show that the Soviets are not actually liberating the American workers. They're, brutalizing people. It reminds me of the scene in Sliders. If you know about Sliders, it was a sci-fi TV show where they go into alternative realities. And one of the first episodes, they go to an alternative reality where the Soviet Union wins the Cold War. And basically, people are just getting mowed down on the street by the KGB and and dragged away into that's not what even an autocratic regime looks like.
If you're doing that, you haven't won yet.
Yeah. So you basically have this caricature of a bad guy, because everybody watching in 1984 knows that the Soviets are the bad guys. We don't need to have an explanation of them, or we don't need to go into their. It's like an era when you used to have bad guys who were just bad guys. Like now, all the bad guys have to have backstories about why they became bad guys. But at this period, it's like they're the bad guys. Don't worry about it.
I mean, the Cuban gets a backstory, but then no one else does. Not even the kind of specialist anti-guerrilla guy. He gets no character exposition.
I don't think anyone really gets much of a backstory. The high school students
neither do the Americans.
Yeah, barely.
I was looking at when they engraved the names on the rock, because that's the only time you find out people's surnames.
Right. Yeah. Well, I would say that, rather than thinking about other anti-Soviet propaganda films, although this definitely could be viewed in the kind of as part of the series of propaganda films that was made during the Cold War to propagandize American people against the Soviet Union. I think it's worthwhile to maybe compare it to a movie like Independence Day, or War of the Worlds. Like this is the real trauma here is just that that America is being overwhelmed by a superior force. And it's just an alien.
If the Nazis had invaded and if the Soviets invaded in this film, you could have swapped the characters and all you'd have to change is the uniforms and the tanks.
Right. Oh yeah, that's right. Although there are some fun details. I mean, the fact that that the invasion came down through Mexico,
like through cargo planes.
Yeah,
like commercial flights,
charter planes.
This predicts the 21st century crises of 9/11 and the border crisis.
Well, it just echoes Reaganism.
Yeah.
All the absurd fantasies of the Reagan administration.
I mean, what I was interested in talking about in regards to interpretation.
I just want to say, I kept saying to Noah, I said, we have to fight them there so we don't fight them here.
What's the difference?
We have to go down to Nicaragua to fight them there, or else they'll come here. All right,
and the only difference between us and them is that we're here and they're over there.
I know. So if we went down to fight them there, then
they would be over here.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Because I became a communist more or less because I watched an anti-communist film.
Oh, which one was that?
The Baader-Meinhof complex.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The Red Army faction.
Right.
Yeah, I watched that as an impressionable teenager and was like, damn, it's really cool to be these people that were meant to be kind of the tragic, heroic villain idiots of this film.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think anyone's going to become a communist from this, not because the Soviets are kind of portrayed as evil, which they are, but kind of they aren't really portrayed as people and characters, as Jen is saying, as we've been saying, that kind of, it's not that they're really being invaded by this complex force with all its kind of thing. It's just like, we want a setup where Americans get to go to the hills and prove that under every blade of grass there's a rifle. And our strongest enemy of the time is the Soviet Union, so it's going to be the Soviets.
Right. Okay, I want to show you guys a bit of this review of the movie from Siskel and Ebert and see what you think of how they argued about it at the time.
Red Dawn, the first teenage war film. The next teenage western is the next, I guess. But the film does not maintain its great beginning. It becomes involved in all sorts of macho training exercises and an investigation in the mind of a Cuban freedom fighter and whether right-wing totalitarianism is the same as left-wing totalitarianism. So as much as I enjoyed, say, the first hour of Red Dawn, the film just peters out at the end. A mixed review from me.
A real negative review from me, Gene. I think this movie is corrupt from beginning to end. And one of the problems I have with it is that it makes a very definite political statement. In other words, people should have handguns. They shouldn't be registered. The commies will come in and get the handgun. And then what do the teenagers use? Machine guns and anti-tank missiles. Well, that's terrific. Maybe we should have those too. There is a whole right-wing ideology in this picture that the picture itself doesn't deserve because it doesn't make its arguments with any kind of attention to logic. There is nothing in this movie. There is not a scene in this movie that doesn't have the gravest logical flaws in it, starting with the possibility that America would be invaded by paratroopers. I doubt it. I think if we're invaded at all, it'll probably be Roger, everybody will be dead, and that'll be that.
Okay, but give the film at least the beginning of its premise.
Okay, I'll give it its premise. I'll give it the premise. We're invaded. Okay. Then I'll give it the next idea. Yeah. Teenagers are going to fight the Russians. How come these teenagers are so smart that the Russians and Cubans are constantly doing nothing more than standing there and being blown up? I believe it'd be more interesting if the teenagers had done things like steal their gasoline or let the air out of their tires.
Let me tell you,
instead of using anti-tank missiles against
this movie, you and I both know that this movie is not about how teenagers would beat the Russians.
Total fantasy pandering to teenagers.
That's right.
Yes.
Like most movies that pander to teenagers, and most movies pander to anybody. Yeah. And this movie is saying, hey, kids, here's, forget your little, love everybody in the world. Someday the Russians are going to come here. Now, you may not believe that. I may not believe that. But this movie wants to play to that. And I think it is so fascinating about what it would be like if that I was fascinated for a while.
What it would be like if, because I would like to see a movie in which realistic convincing plausible teenagers in this situation behave the way 15 and 16-year-old kids might
and you know
behave.
what it would be,
You
Roger?
know how they behave in this movie?
No.
They behave like John Wayne would behave.
No, because your movie, the reality would mean a short subject. They'd be blown away.
That was rather fractious.
yeah. They were known for that.
Some parts didn't really connect to, like, how is it meant to be a critique of left-wing or right-wing totalitarianism? Like, I don't think that was particularly...
It's not really a critique. It's just a depiction of, an invading totalitarian force, I suppose. Yeah. That mayor's a real bastard, collaborating and gets all upset when his people are shot. How dare you, the hypocrite.
There's comments in the chat, by the way. I don't know if you guys have clicked on it. Yeah.
No, I got to click. Okay, what is... let's see. Macho training exercises, one bridge too far.
Were they actually? When were the training exercises?
I don't.
I think they learned on the job, basically. They learned from ambush to ambush.
Yeah, right. They learned how to win by continually winning,
practicing.
Yeah, killing the Russians.
It was really funny. It just the start of the invasion where he's like, "Go to the headquarters of the liberals and get the list of all the gun owners and shoot them all."
Right. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, I enjoyed that. And all the politicians, of course, can't be trusted. They're corrupted, in league with the communists. That argument was interesting. I think I side with Siskel in a way, in so much as like you shouldn't judge this movie on its politics, which we said earlier. Like we can't. Although, I mean, obviously, his politics are, extremely absurdly right wing. But what do you think if we can think of this just in terms of like what was accomplished for the characters, what was the story about? What was the theme of the movie, and what maybe was its message, other than, the Soviets are bad and we shouldn't register our guns and, we should.
I think the message that insurgency is hell was there for sure.
Right, but it was meaningful.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, these kids were taken from being just everyday, ordinary American dumb fucks to being, heroes. Part of
the third of you in California.
Yeah. Yeah. They protected the nation.
Insurgency will make you into kind of like a kind of high quality person who's respected by your patriotic community, but in the end, it'll probably kill you or break you.
Right. But in the end, we all get beaten, killed, or broken. That's everybody's end. So this is a noble end, right? You can have a life worth living if you're willing to die. If you're willing to fight.
It also speaks to Americans' desire to see themselves as the victim and the underdog, as opposed to they're actually the Soviets in real life.
Oh, Americans would love to be actually invaded.
Yeah, it's a really bizarre thing, but
America's constantly inventing it itself being invaded by like immigrants and MS-13 and shit.
But you got to take it again from the point of view of it being a picture about coming of age for teenagers. Like it wasn't just a movie about, obviously like Rambo. Rambo's even a better example. We like to make ourselves into the victims and portray ourselves as the underdog and all that. But this was a coming of age story for a bunch of, for a teenage audience.
I mean, it makes
coming of age and coming of death.
It makes sense. I mean, it's an action movie, right?
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, this movie, in America, the way propaganda works is that it's, dictated by market forces. It's not like you have the government directly producing propaganda movies, but instead you have sort of...
I mean, the CIA only makes the unprofitable stuff.
Well, you have the military-industrial complex...
Like left-wing magazines.
Yeah, supporting you have the military-industrial complex supporting movies, but movies obviously have to make money for studios at the end of the day. America has farmed out its propaganda making to private entities, just like it does everything else. And so making a I can see the pitch. It's like, we're going to make an anti-communist movie that hits the mid-1980s Reagan zeitgeist. But how are we going to make that profitable? We're going to stick Breakfast Club together with
this. I think came out before Breakfast Club, but yeah.
But it's like we're gonna do a coming of age movie, and we're gonna set it in a setting that kind of generally spoon feeds our population the kind of political message that they want to get. But of course, if you give people just unadulterated straight propaganda, it's not that popular. People don't like it. That's why Christian movies don't do particularly well, because people are like,
just bad.
They're bad because they're trying to ram a very concrete political message, which if you're not on that kind of ideological wavelength, it's kind of off-putting. Whereas this one, it's giving you an action movie, which could be any action movie. It's giving you a teen coming of age movie, which could be any other. It could have been set in World War II with French kids. It could have been set during the American Revolution against the British. But it's giving you all these kind of things, but in an appropriate packaging, which fits the political zeitgeist of the time. So
Nathan was saying it reminded him a lot of a film he saw that was about Belarusian partisans.
Yeah, well, you, Stefan, started this conversation by saying that you laughed at it. You thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
And I wonder to what extent the filmmakers were serious. I mean, I know I'm going to intention here, but should we see parts of this movie as being, at least on some level, ironic? Not necessarily satirical, but
to kind of go away from intention and talk about what's received. Yeah, I think this film can definitely be received as a comedy in parts, and certainly something which is intended to be on some level ironic. Like, it's not, you're not laughing at it. You're like, because I think the movie is kind of ridiculous. I mean, it's sometimes it's serious. It's sometimes, like at the end when the two brothers die, it makes you want to feel. And some other parts during it, like other times when insurgents die. But there's other times where it's kind of like, it's just the Americans like mowing down the Soviets in this kind of a very exaggerated way. And obviously, I don't think anyone's going to take, like, you're either going to be whooping or you're going to be laughing at that scene, right? Or, you're not going to care. You're going to think it sucks. So I think definitely in those parts, it could be taken as kind of like an ironic, like a wink and nudge. Like, obviously this wouldn't happen. Like, really, they'd be killing like one guy, but we had this budget, so we're going to blow up all this shit. Like, have fun.
Mm-hmm. I think that it would be hard. I'd be hard pressed to find a moment where I could say, okay, this was edited and shot with the intention of being mocking or campy.
But aren't action movies like campy by definition? Like action movies themselves, the way violence is portrayed, whether they're intending to be comical or not, if you consider them, if you don't suspend your disbelief, they're kind of ridiculous, right?
Like when the guy gets shot off his horse by a helicopter gunship and then stands up.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like any action movie is like that. Like, people take those John Woo movies really seriously, but people are shooting their guns like this, and like in real life, that would mess up your gun. So, like, action movies in and of themselves are a kind of caricaturish depiction of, like, a pantomime depiction of violence, which is in itself quite funny, even though they're not like necessarily intended to be funny themselves. It's like wearing exaggerated makeup on the stage or something like that. So I think when we think about it, especially Stefan, who's actually seen conflict firsthand, when you've seen a conflict, and we all have a lot more familiarity today with what conflicts look like, even if we haven't been in a conflict, simply because of the proliferation of images on social media. I mean, even in the 80s, the images that we received would have been those curated for us.
To be honest, I'm not sure how much watching war on social media gets you any kind of true impression of what it's like, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like at least what it looks like aesthetically, like what a bombed out town, like what today we can see, like what does Mosul look like, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I've seen Mosul, I've seen Kirkuk, and I've seen Mosul, and like when you see him in person, obviously it's like different. But looking at a picture and then that of like an unfiltered picture is like different again from getting something that's filtered through the mainstream media establishment.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, to go back to the point I'm trying to say is like, I think that like ridiculous nature of the violence is like inherent to the movie, inherent to the genre of the action movie. Like, even if those action movies are trying to be serious, because if you look at a serious war movie, one that is like really genuinely trying to be serious, the way they portray violence is actually quite different from the way that an action movie would portray violence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so like now my question is, again, trying to be critics here and have a way of interpreting these films. Like how are we to judge action movies? When is an action movie that's always overblown, exaggerated, fantastical, somewhat comical, even by not by design, but just because of the way because of the the tropes that are used and the imagery that's usually turned to. How are we to judge a successful action movie? What are we looking for when we watch
define successful?
Right, that's what I'm asking you. Like,
I mean, if you want to, did it do well financially? Then it's successful.
No, I mean for the audience. I mean, for a critic.
I mean, it's normally when you use this mass violence to tell a kind of character drama, which you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Like, for instance, with Saving Private Ryan, there's these group of guys going to retrieve another guy who's lost to bring him back to his family. And if you told that outside of a war, it'd be a very different story, because there wouldn't be all these, obviously in these kind of cross-country retrieving a person movies, which aren't set in a war, they do create all these obstacles and so on. But the obstacles in a war movie are kind of distinctly different and can seem much more plausible to people. Like, compare like an action film to a romance film. A constant complaint about romance films is that they're contrived. Now, the only reason two people that are attracted to each other don't come together is because of some ridiculous contrived circumstances. But obviously, if you put them in between a fucking war, then you've got a real reason which blockades them. Like, it's this thing this tool to create like massive drama, and with the constant hanging threat of death and so on. I think it can be used to generate and these character dramas which otherwise could seem quite ridiculous or contrived.
What about a movie like Raiders of the Lost Ark, which for me is like a very high caliber escapist fantasy action movie that doesn't deliver a character drama. I mean, there is a love story in it, but it's not what we're watching this thing for. And
it's squashbuckling adventure. It's squashbuckling adventure.
But like I think that's more like that's the same sort of the film as The Goonies, right? It's just with adult characters.
Or even like Sharp, which is like the historical version of that, where which is with Sean Bean, where he plays an officer in the Napoleonic Wars, but it's kind of like a fantasy as well. People like squashbuckling adventures, right?
Yeah, people do, but why? I mean, what is it that makes a film like, I'm going to say Raiders again, successful? And should we be comparing a movie like Red Dawn to Raiders of the Lost Ark? Is that how we should think about it? As being escapist fantasy, wish fulfillment, and when does a wish fulfillment film like Raiders become something closer to, if not art, at least popular art? Something worthwhile, something worth remembering, worth being in the film archive,
worth preserving from that essay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that film is worth preserving. Raiders. I don't know if Red Dawn is. I don't think maybe.
No, I think we need to preserve Red Dawn to demonstrate like reactionary American culture. Once we won the revolution.
But not as art, right? Not as film art, but as
well, like there are plenty of reactionary movies in the American archives that are enjoyable to watch because they have good acting, they have funny dialogue, they have like interesting actions. Think of something like Con Air. Like even sometimes you can get a perverse pleasure from the ridiculous political message that's being given. You know, like Con Air is literally all the bad guys are tropes of everything that conservative America is terrified of, right? So Red Dawn is, I mean, you can enjoy it. I guess there's different ways to enjoy it. Somebody might enjoy it as a celebration of like war, masculinity, individualism, all those kind of right-wing things. Somebody might enjoy it as it's so cheesy that it's enjoyable. You know, that its portrayal of the Soviets is cartoonish and the action is cartoonish, but that's kind of funny. That's kind of enjoyable within its particular context. And you enjoy it because you understand the context the film was being made in. And it tells you something like you could, I mean, I sometimes watch the right-wing Turkish movies, which I know about Turkish politics and history, which I enjoy because they're cheesy and I know the context of them, right? Maybe someone who didn't know the context of Turkish politics and history would find it just boring, right? Whereas if you understand what the message is and you think it's funny, you can enjoy it. So you can enjoy these movies on a number of different levels. I think something like Raiders of the Lost Ark, I guess it's in that same genre as well, but obviously it has a less like overt political message in it. Although I think you could still probably find at least some political architecture and understandings that undergird that movie. But you know, because he is fighting Nazis all the way through it, and then he's doing a bit of imperialism in the middle movie. But you know, it's enjoyable because it's got that stuff like funny dialogue, things that will make you giggle, good set piece cinematography, like something like Raiders of the Lost Ark or Temple of Doom or Last Crusade. Like I remember as a kid thinking the bit at the end of Last Crusade was like really awesome when the guy drinks from the wrong cup of juice, and then he goes all old and stuff, which is awesome. So there's like, you know, it's a spectacle, right? It's a spectacle.
It can also be like advanced slapstick, like when the guy tries to fight with a sword and he shoots him. That's just slapstick, right?
Right. Okay, I think we've got lots of comments here. We should probably in a minute, like, take questions or engage with our comments. I think that would be a worthwhile thing to try to do. Maybe I think that's just what the professional Twitch people do. They talk to them.
I mean, I agree with one of the.
But I want to say something before we go to the comments, though, because I'm going to reference watching this with my son last night again, and there's a scene in Red Dawn. There's two scenes that I think we should contrast to each other, and like first of all, like look at it ideologically, and then ask ourselves like, if we're judging this as an action movie only, how do these things work? There's the scene where they're visiting Harry Dean Stanton at the drive-in, and you know that's Patrick Swayze's dad and Charlie Sheen's dad, and he says to them, you know, kids, when you were growing up, I did a lot of things that make you hate me, but I think now you understand why I was like that. And I turned to Noah and I said, you know, son, when you were growing up, I know I made you soft and I didn't do nearly enough to toughen you up. But that was only because when the Soviets come, I want you to join them. You got to be a collaborator.
Whoever invades, just collaborate.
Yeah.
And
he's
old.
Like, But we were, I mean, it was just, even before I said that to him, we were both just laughing at the scene with the father. And watching with him was particularly funny.
I mean, that was one of the hardest bits I laughed when he shouts, "Avenge me, avenge me." That was just so fucking funny. Like, what? Like, I guess that was meant to be serious, but like, fucking hell. That was
there's certain people who would find that like deeply meaningful. I mean, have you seen, like I was flicking through Twitter while I'm in my COVID exile, and I found a video of Tucker Carlson's new documentary, which is about like men being
Mhm.
men, and I think it's got Piers Morgan saying the cycle begins, soft times leads to decline, which leads to tough men, and there's all these pictures of men wrestling and like putting infrared light on their balls and throwing tires around and things like that. And the type of people who would be like into that are also the type of people who would find like Avenge Me as like a deeply meaningful and emotionally fulfilling kind of response.
Okay, so there's two more scenes that we got to look at.
But you're a soft lib and a cynic, right? You're a soft lib and a cynic, and you can't feel the emotional weight.
But I can. This is where you're wrong. I can, because, all right, so then there's a scene. I'm going to go in a different order. There's a scene later when they've watched their father die. He gets lined up and they sing God Bless America, or America the Beautiful. They sing America the Beautiful, and I started singing along. Okay, like I'm like, oh beautiful for
I knew the lyrics, I would have.
skies. I was there with them, and right where they get to the word America, like the Soviet troops open up on them, and they're mowed down, and then they go back to their little, insurgents camp, which was very lovely, by the way. It reminded me of summer camp to watch them with the little fire pit, and they had the crates full of, I think they were roasting marshmallows. But in any case, then they're like all crying, and Patrick Swayze is walking around. Don't cry, turn it into something else. Turn it into something else. Let it transform into something else. Like hatred, right?
He says, don't cry at any time again in your life.
In your life. Never cry again in your life. The father had said that earlier. That's right. That's right. But it is. Like, they did need to turn. I was like, yeah, that's right. They have to turn their sadness into a commitment to fight back. They have to transform themselves into warriors out of this. I'm there. Like, I'm no longer like, I'm not saying that's toxic masculinity or anything. And it's not just the men or the boys. There's another scene. Charlie Sheen hands a dish to, I think it's Michael J. Fox's mom from Back to the Future, and Leah Thompson, and says, "Why don't you make yourself useful and wash the dishes?" And she just smacks him, and like throws his dish or something, and she says, "I'm just as much a part of this fighting machine as you are. I'm just as much a Wolverine as you are.
Let's go, boss.
I turned my tears into hate already years ago, before you even got out here in the woods. As a young woman in America, I know how to do that better than you ever could." I'm elaborating a little bit. I don't think she said these things. And then Jennifer Grey from Dirty Dancing says, what you said was wrong. And they're not saying we're triggered, or they're like, we will, we are just as good as you. We're warriors, and you better treat us with respect. And I didn't think these things were disconnected. Like, I think that it was all of a piece. Like, I trained you how to be hard. Don't cry for me. Avenge me. And women can be warriors. It's all of a piece. And I was with them. And in the end, the American flag's there, and we're looking at Patrick Swayze, the martyred child soldier, and we're feeling moved. And it's even more moving than the ending of Stripes, where you get to see Bill Murray on the cover of Playboy magazine, which was also one of those cathartic moments for me. But anyway.
But yeah, it was quite an inclusive group of child soldiers, because they didn't just have two girls, but they also had a Latino guy, which they used to like trick the Cubans into coming out of cover by speaking Spanish at them.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. Why don't we take some questions from, let's see, we got some comments here. Someone says the alpha males are back, and they include alpha females.
The thing I wanted to comment on was the whole banality of evil thing.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Not banality of violence, anyway. That everyday violence, like if not even everyday violence, if like you showed like a realistic war movie, it would just be some guys stood like 800 meters from some other guys, which they can barely see on the horizon, and then just firing shots at them. And you do that for like an hour or whatever, and
Right.
like these, you'll have like massive exchanges of fire, and like one person will die.
Right.
I mean,
What have you seen like All Quiet on the Western Front?
I don't think so. That's quite an old movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like real old.
Mm-hmm. Or this same director also co-wrote Apocalypse Now, which is maybe not a very realistic war movie, but it's sort of an anti-war movie.
I watched Apocalypse Now in a shepherd's hut in Syria while I was hiding from the Turkish Air Force.
Oh, really? Tell that story. Like, how did that come to be?
Well, it was after the Turkish airstrikes, after the Turkish Air Force blew up the point next to us during our training. We started to, instead of sleeping in base at night, we would sleep like in like hollows in the ground or like in trenches or whatever. And one night we were in like a shepherd's hut. Well, it was actually a couple of nights. One night, our commander showed us a Turkish film, which was about, it was unsubtitled in Turkish. And it was about the whole thing. I don't know if Jen's heard of this, but the whole thing was set in a prison van, driving from one location to another. And there was like some very fucked up prisoners in the back who'd been like, not fucked up, they were like communists or whatever, who'd been like tortured. And one of them was like really failing in health, and they didn't have any water. And it was just this incredibly grim film of these communists like slowly dying in the back of a van. And we were just sat in this shed watching this. And then the next time we got to watch Apocalypse Now, which is a really cool film. And it was epic.
Yeah. And did that make you feel better after having watched the other film? Was this like more uplifting? Were you more ready?
Oh yeah, definitely. It was a sick film. It was great.
yeah.
Well, I mean, like, it's because a movie can't a movie can't capture the pace of a war very well, because it's like long periods of boredom and doing nothing, followed by short, intensive moments of fear and like all the stuff going on. That's not going to make a really good movie, is it? I mean, I suppose you could make a movie where it's like that, but it'd be kind of experimental. It wouldn't be great for a mass market movie because people need their kind of 3-act structure. They need their tempo action and things like that.
Well, look, there are ways to do that, to capture that feeling without making an Andy Warhol film of 8 hours. There are. That's the artistry of the filmmaker. A film like Catch-22 doesn't quite get there, but it's aiming at, certainly the novel was aiming at, communicating the absurdity and which concludes, I think, the boredom and the inhumanity of war.
No, but I'm talking about an action movie, though. Like we're talking here, not
right.
like.
Well, right. No, an action movie is not designed. That's not what an action movie is for.
Have you guys
seen Jarhead?
No,
I haven't seen Jarhead. No,
that's like a realistic action film, which also it became infamous because they made like a falsely cut trailer where it was portrayed as like a comedy movie, which tricked like 8-year-old me, and I got my friend's family to go with me to the cinema, and it was this quite realistic, grim war movie. It was set in Iraq, 1991, I think, not 2003, and basically it's about those guys are getting prepared to go into the war, getting prepared. Some of them die in like stupid accidents or whatever. They're getting prepared. Finally, they get sent out on a mission. They get close to where they were meant to be going. They're like infantrymen, scout snipers or whatever. They get a lock on the position they're meant to fire upon, and then it gets hit with an airstrike, and then they don't have anything to do.
Yeah,
and I think that's probably why they falsely edited the trailer.
Right. But an action film, to go back to that, rather than a film like Jarhead, is not meant to. I don't think it's meant to be propaganda. Not really. Have you guys ever seen the movie Sullivan's Travels? It's another old movie. It's about a filmmaker.
How old do you say is it? How old is it?
Like the 40s.
I see. This was what my son would call a cowboy my 3-year-old thinks any movie made before 1980 is a cowboy movie because basically the movies that my dad watch are cowboy movies interspersed with other black and white movies. So he goes, so if you want to terrify my son, you say, do you want to watch a cowboy movie? He's like, no cowboy.
Well, there are no cowboys in this movie, but it's 1941, and it's a Preston Sturges movie, and it's about a filmmaker who is tired of making big Hollywood comedies and musicals, and decides he's gonna. And it's like made and set in the Depression. He's gonna make a picture for the people. He's gonna go out on the road and make a movie about real life, about the hardships of life in America. And Sullivan's Travels is that movie, but he ends up in a prison camp. And he's a labor camp, and he's it's miserable. But they do have one amenity where they have one bit of leisure. They get to watch a movie once a week. And they watch this like Donald Duck or like old Disney movie where like Goofy's just running around, crashing into shelving and things are falling down, and all the prisoners with him just laugh hysterically at this, and they just for the first time in a week or a month they're having a good time. And Sullivan does get out of prison, and when he comes back to Hollywood, he says, "I'm never making a realistic movie again. That's not what movies are for."
Yeah,
it's true. I mean, like that's that's why I don't tend to watch like intellectual movies. I remember I used to feel a duty to go watch all the depressing Iranian movies and like Turkish movies. I was like, I don't enjoy these. I either come out and I've been bored, or I come out and I feel miserable, right?
Right.
Now, I generally only watch things with vampires, spaceships, or something else like that. Because honestly, like, I think a lot of people, I mean, I don't know if it applies to everybody else, but when I'm reading, I read a lot of news, I read a lot of history books, and those things can be quite heavy at times, and you don't realize that they're heavy when you're reading them, but you're reading like a lot of like brutal stuff happening in the past, and you just don't want to have to. You want to just watch something that's ridiculous to a certain degree. So even an action movie that's violent, if the violence is kind of ridiculous, unrealistic violence, like it's not really violence, is it? If you're watching a brutal war movie where it's showing you like what it actually looks like when someone gets blown up, there's legs everywhere, people are screaming, and like very things, children are dying. Yeah, like that's not the same as watching Demolition Man, right?
No,
it's like a big. There's a big difference there, and I guess with the action movies in America, even this is not the intention, right? The military industrial complex isn't just bankrolling Transformers because it's like deeply believes in Optimus Prime. There's a reason to get people to think war is cool. You get to use all these cool gadgets and things like that. And so even if that's not the intent.
Does a military industrial complex bankroll Transformer movies? Is
yes.
No, it's just the DoD which did the Transformer movies.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. What's the guy who starred in those? The guy, God, I should know his name. Shia LaBeouf. Shia LaBeouf.
You wrote
on the take from. Yeah, I wrote a little video about him, script about Shia LaBeouf, and
he was
on
driven
the take.
mad by Trump.
He was driven mad before that. He's been mad the whole time.
But a lot of these movies, especially the kind of modern day kids sci-fi movies, have a Department of Defense support in terms of they let them use military assets. They let people do things. They're not doing this just for the good of their health. They're doing this to present an image of violence, of war. That is cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you use DoD stocks, you have to have like an advisor on set which makes sure that the U.S. military is portrayed in a way that the U.S. military would like. And if you don't do that, then basically you can get a significant amount of U.S. military stock, and you can't make a large-scale U.S. military movie.
Yeah, but the Transformers is about trucks that turn into robots. It's
And
not
fight a
about
war.
Yeah,
Fight a
okay.
war, though.
It'd be funny if in the Transformers that like they had it so like the Decepticons were like in Al Qaeda or whatever.
Yeah, well,
Like when the Joker was the Iranian ambassador.
look, I haven't seen any of the Transformer movies. Okay, I'll confess. My understanding of Transformers is from the 1980 cartoon.
Wait, Joker was the Iranian ambassador?
Oh, you don't know about this? Yeah. So Iran makes the Joker in one Batman comic, the Iranian ambassador, because obviously then he has diplomatic immunity and he can't be arrested.
Oh, okay.
And he makes it like a speech for Iran at like the UN and stuff, and yeah, blah blah blah, whatever. But yeah, it's obviously completely mental.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's see if the people have things to ask us in the chat. But
Somebody's saying bat.
Bat. I don't know exactly why. Probably.
Is that a Matt Berry reference? I wonder. His character.
Put that on screen, Doug.
Huh?
Put that image I put in the private chat on screen.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. It'll take me a moment.
We have to vamp while Doug's fiddling with the technology, Stefan.
Sorry,
It was a reference to Matt Berry, by the way. Bat. Matt Berry turns into a bat in his TV show.
Another thing I was saying was it's good that American movies now are very diverse and have one of each race and whatever. It makes it much easier for me to tell the characters apart.
Oh,
So
yeah, that is very helpful.
With the mostly male and mostly white cast, I was having trouble remembering them all.
Here we go.
Oh, this is amazing. He also doesn't look like an Iranian.
He looks very pale.
Well, he's wearing clown makeup, you know.
But he's not wearing the appropriate headdress. Iranians don't wear headdress like that. That's an Arab headdress.
Well,
Whatever.
He's doing his best, Jen.
It's like when they made the Iron
Why
Chef.
can't an Iranian wear an Arabian headdress? Are you being?
I suppose he could be from Khuzestan, so he might be from the Arab minority in Iran, and there's lots of reasons, I suppose. But no, I did not know about that Batman. But returning to this, I'm super surprised, Doug, you didn't know about like the close relationship between the military-industrial complex and Hollywood in terms of.
All I knew about
Doug's a patriot. He blocks these things out.
All I knew about was that in the 80s, there was a secret military force in outer space fighting the war against the Galactic Empire that was using video game technology to find the next star pilot.
Is that
Have you guys seen the Battlefield Earth?
Is that a movie?
No, that's what's his name? That's
the Scientology movie.
Scientology movie.
For no reason whatsoever, I'm going to now share the trailer for the movie I just referenced, just to kill some time. Here we go.
I mean, we're past an hour. We can just end it if you want.
No, but we got people watching, and everyone needs to know about this.
Come on, Alex, they're here!
Alex Rogan had a dream
You really are leaving here, aren't you?
to be as far away from here as possible.
You get your chance when it comes. You
It's also interesting to compare this old style of trailer to our current
The new
style.
trailer.
It started with a game,
You gonna bust the record.
but it wasn't just any game.
You have been recruited by the Star League to defend the frontier against Sword and the Blood Armada.
And then one night,
Centauri's the name.
Oh, nice.
Talk about a matter of utmost importance. Step into my office. I've seen him come and I've seen him go, but you're the best, my boy. Light years ahead of the competition. Hey.
Alex didn't find his dream.
Hey, look out! Oh dear.
His
I thought they were in a tunnel.
found him.
All right.
I'm gonna watch
That's
that
fun.
movie.
That is the best. Yeah. That, by the way, is George W. Bush's favorite movie.
Is it?
Yeah.
Why not Red Dawn?
I don't know. It was this one. I believe that's right. Maybe that's just a rumor, but
Have you guys read Ender's Game?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. I've read the Ender's Game book, and think I've seen the movie as well.
The movie's very bad from what I've heard.
okay, guys, I'm sorry. I was remembering an Onion article from 2003. Bush cites The Last Starfighter as his inspiration for entering politics.
Well, you would never know now because the Onion is kind of redundant.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
it's like a redundant.
What the fuck was that one I sent to you in the fucking TIR chat, which was like, we need to like, all right, to protect Israel? No, not Israel, something else. It was like to protect Europe from a greater war. We need to, to protect Taiwan and Europe.
We need to bomb Iran.
We need to bomb Iran.
Right.
There
And
we
it's
go.
like, what the fuck? Like, not even protect Israel or anyone that's kind of relevant. Protect Taiwan. It's just, I guess, to show that we're fucking big in our fucking boots.
It's really amazing because like things have totally like it's just so hard to know what's ironic and what's not. I think memes are part of the reason that it's like that now, but also politics is so absurd now. The contradictions have got to such an extent that like anything you could totally believe someone is saying it, because the liberals have kind of lost their mind as well. Like the conservatives have lost their mind for a while and like had all these bonkers things that they said, but the liberals have always kind of tried to keep things on a kind of, oh, well, we're the adults in the room. But I think Trump broke them. And I think now they're just like all kinds of bonkers stuff comes out now.
The guy I mentioned worked for Clinton. That wrote that article. The bomb around Taiwan. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
the Clinton administration. Yeah, he wasn't right wing. Of course not. That's a liberal. That's what liberals think.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Sometimes I think maybe it's difficult to distinguish between, a mainstream Democrat or even a liberal Democrat and a Republican.
Well, that's
when it comes to foreign policy, they're both absolutely bonkers.
Yeah. Mm. All right, listen. Here's my last question. We've gone for an hour. I know that in the future maybe we'll go even longer. Oh, there's some more comments here. Let's see. I'm having trouble.
He was saying that Clarence Thomas apparently makes all his clerks watch Foundationhead.
Fountainhead.
Yeah, whatever.
Fountainhead.
There is a movie. Is there a movie of Fountainhead?
Yeah.
Is it old? Is it bad? Well, obviously it's bad.
What if nobody was ever sane and we're just now coming to terms with it? I think that
may well be the truth.
Before they invented the DSM, there wasn't any insane people. They were just weirdos.
Just weirdos. So, like, okay, what do you think? How could someone come along and make a movie that was as entertaining as Red Dawn today, that would be able to just be enjoyed by multiple different kinds of people on the level of entertainment, despite whatever ham-fisted ideological statements were in it? Would that be possible today? Because I think obviously Roger Ebert in the review was the typical, left liberal audience member who found Red Dawn to be
how did Red Dawn 2012? Was that? It wasn't trying to be fun at all. It was much more grim, right?
It was just a bad movie. It was a bad movie, and the thing is, the premise was ridiculous.
It was too boring to even have a ham-fisted ideological perspective. It was just
shit.
Yeah. Look at the Red Dawn poster. That's from 2012.
Why don't you play us the Red Dawn 2012 trailer to play?
Okay, let's do that.
End us up.
But I would say, I mean, at least in the 1980s, to many Americans, it was kind of plausible that there was some kind of military parity with the Soviet Union. But like today, America being invaded, it's got to be aliens, right?
Right.
So it's got to be aliens. That's the only.
Well, not anymore. It could be Russia again now.
Yeah, but it would still seem a bit ridiculous. I think. What are they going to do?
It seemed ridiculous in 1984. Come on.
Did it?
Yeah. That was ridiculous. To anyone who was an adult. Anyway, here we go.
Jen, how old are you in 1984?
2.
You? Or 2?
Yeah.
I was 13.
You're in the Air Force, right?
Marines, actually.
Oh, fuck, it's him.
A few weeks.
Oh, wow.
30 seconds left. Just get us in field goal range. 22.
The blackout may run along the entire northwest corridor.
What's going on?
The CGI here looks worse than the practical effects in the first movie.
Oh yeah.
Like the parachutes.
All right. That's enough of that. Yeah, no, it looks cheap in comparison. Weirdly, it looked the CGI of paratroopers is like, I don't believe for a second that
the budget
they actually
was
had
$65 million.
Yeah, wow. Well, different times too, but yeah, they had actual like people parachuting down to film that scene in Red Dawn, and obviously, I think I saw Buzz Lightyear in the sequence with the.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like PS3 graphics or something.
Yeah. Anyway, so do you think that there could be just a straightforward shoot 'em up, ridiculously heroic, and naive action movie that would succeed today? Do you think people would want that?
Yeah, I think it could definitely succeed. I think getting made would probably be let's see. Maybe Stefan versus ISIS would be that.
Maybe.
Well, I think Stefan versus ISIS is going to be a very serious picture. And
it's not. By the way, because they're worried about ISIS in the title, the film might eventually be called Stefan.
That's even cooler.
That is, but I think I like Stefan versus ISIS, but
But from Stefan's
Stefan's better for me because it obviously just makes it all about me.
That's true, and that means it's better for us. So yes. I hope that's what happens. If you enjoy these videos, you should click on the subscribe button and click that bell. You should also consider supporting me on Patreon. Patrons get access to a second behind-the-scenes Parrot Room discussion where we dish out gossip or go into the weeds on topics such as the tendency of the rate of profit to decline, imperialism, and the critical theories of Tiffany Brissett and Donald Most. You'll also get access to both the public and private version of the revised Pop the Left series with Ashley Frawley and Pascal Robert, and the new Zoomer Philosophy series. Your support will not only make content like this possible, it will also help to establish a new publishing venture through Diet Soap Media. Right now, supporting me on Patreon will make a big difference.